Hello students, the lecture of today what we have discussed about Hawthorne experiment which is conducted by Alton Mayo. In a previous lecture we will discuss scientific management theory. It is very effective and it has many drawback also, and industrial experiences indicates that there were more factors responsible for productivity that explained by a scientific management for improving the performance of an employee in a company. So human relation approach came into existence. Alton Mayo. George Alton Mayo was an Australian born psychologist, researcher and organizational theorist. Mayo is also known as a founder of human relation management or human relation approach. He carried out a number of investigations to look at a way of improving productivity at workplace. The research he conducted under the rubric of Hawthorne study in the late 1920 and early 1930s showed the importance of group in affecting the behavior of individual at workplace. Western Electric Hawthorne work was a manufacturing unit of AT&T system. It produced telephones, cables, transmissions, equipments and switching equipments. In Hawthorne plant, employees were assigned to precisely measured tasks in highly specialized departments, from switchboard wiring to punch and die tool making, etc. It became one of the forerunners in applying scientific management to its production. To better understand workers' productivity and level of job satisfaction, Western Electric became increasingly interested in studies from the social, behavioral and medical sciences. Research on productivity at massive manufacturing complex like Hawthorne work was made possible through partnership among industries, universities and governments. In 1920, with the support from the National Research Council, the Rockefeller Foundation and eventually a Harvard Business School, Western Electric undertook a series of behavioral experiments. The Hawthorne effect is the idea that behavior during the course of an experiment can be altered by a subject's awareness of participating in an experiment. The initial Hawthorne effect took place in the Hawthorne plant of Western Electric Company. The study were composed of many long investigations into the importance for work behavior and attitude or variety of physical, economic or social variables which helps to improve productivity. The Hawthorne experiment were first conducted in November 1924 at Western Electric Company Hawthorne plant in Chicago. A team of researchers led by a George Alton Mayo from the Harvard Business School carried out the study. The Hawthorne studies can be conveniently divided into a 4 major parts. Each part was the outgrowth of the preceding one. First part is a illumination experiment. Illumination experiment basically based on a intensity of light, and we researchers can find out how the intensity of light or change in the intensity of light affect the productivity of our workers. In second experiment is a relay assembly test room study. Third part of that experiment is a mass interviewing program is conducted between 1928 to 1930, and last experiment was conducted Wang wiring observation room experiment. Now we will discuss the part 1, illumination experiment. Illumination experiment were conducted between 1924 to 1927 and set out to determine the effect of lightning or workers' efficiency. The experiment was conducted in 3 separate departments. One department is the inspection of small parts, second one is a assembly of relays, and third one is a winding coils. So the light intensity was varied from low to high in 4 levels. In the inspection department, the production of workers varied without direct relation to illumination. In assembly, production increased but not solely as a result of change in illumination. And in winding department, production increased with illumination but did not decrease with decrease in illumination or intensity of light. it was concluded that the experiment should be more controlled and other factors except illumination must be eliminated. In this, at that phase, second experiment was more refined and took place in one department only. The researchers can create two groups, one perform as a control group and another perform as a test group, worked in two different buildings. Control group worked under constant illumination and the second group, that is the test group, under three different illumination intensity. Both groups increased production to almost same level. At that part of experiment which determined what amount of increase in production was due to illumination. So the control group and test group work under a constant intensity. Efficiency of employee did not change despite insufficient illumination. The employees maintained production and reported to no eye strain and less fatigue than working in a bright lights. But if the bulb remain constant and electrician reduces the illumination without telling them, the employees felt that illumination was not changed and felt the same way. So the conclusion of part 1, the illumination experiment, is that the light intensity has no conclusive effect on output. There are so many other factors which can work for a labor efficiency or which can work for increased productivity also. Higher worker productivity and satisfaction at all light level. Workers' productivity was stopped with the light level reached moonlight intensity. So it shows that there is some other factors which can work. There is some other factors which can work or affect the labor efficiency and rate of productivity, though the specific problem was not solved with this experiment. So it created a need to gain more knowledge concerning the problem involving human factor was identified. Thus it results in another study at Hawthorne called the relay assembly room test. Relay assembly room test, it was conducted between 1927 to 1929. 5 relay assembler girls and 1 layout operator was chosen for experiment. 1 man to keep records and maintain a friendly atmosphere for the experiment was also present. Assembly of relay was chosen as it was a simple repetitive process and so was an accurate measure for production. In this experiment, 13 test periods were introduced and several factors such as rest pauses, working time, method of payment, etc. were changed to determine their effects on production. Production of the girls increased. Each test period has a higher production records than the preceding one. 5 tentative explanations suggested were: first is improve material condition and method of works. Shorter hours provide relief from fatigue. Shorter work periods provide relief from monotony of work. Wage incentive plans. Change in method of supervision. The first 3 explanations were rejected on close study. To know the truth about a wage incentive plan, 2 more experiments were conducted. There was no change of environment but only change of payment. Wage payment basis remained same, individual piece rate, but changing working conditions similar to those in test rooms were made. So conclusion is that, overall conclusion of this experiment is that no evidence of wage incentives being the only reason for continuous production increase was established. Effect of only wages on output can only be determined if effect of other factors such as interpersonal relationship at workplace, personal situations, outside work were also known. The relay assembly study began in 1927 and continued till 1932 in the mean time, Alton Mayo was called to determine and interpret the Hawthorne experiment. Major conclusion of relay assembly room test is positive effect. Even with negative influence, workers' output will increase as a response to attention. Strong social bonds were created within the test group. Workers are influenced by the need of recognition, securities, and sense of belongingness. After that, the Hawthorne experiment start their third massive part, that is a mass interviewing program. Mayo and his assistant began interviewing, conducting about 21,000 interviews. Basic aim of this study was to determine the relation between employee morale and supervision, and thus to study human relation or attitude concerning human relations at workplace. The objective was to explore information which could be used to improve supervisory training. Initially used the method of direct questioning and changed to non-directive. They discovered that rather than answering direct questions, employees express themselves more candidly if encouraged to speak openly in what was known as indirect interviewing. Indirect interview is defined as a conversation in which the employee is encouraged to express himself freely upon any topic his own choice. Interview time increased from 30 minutes to 90 minutes or even 2 hours. So the result of this experiment, where merely given an opportunity to talk and express grievances, would increase the morale. Complaints were symptoms of deep-rooted disturbances. Workers are governed by experience obtained from both inside and outside the company. Major output which changed to work conditions only. The company's supervisor training courses were revised as per workers' complaint. Items such as wages, hours of work, physical conditions were carriers of social values and thus varied according to employees' position in a group and relation with people outside job. The social groups were important at workplace and control work behavior of individual members. And it is also concluded that the restricted output was a result of pressure of those social groups, and there was a development of informal personal leaderships in those groups. Productivity is affected by non-pay consideration, and social dynamics are also affected at work performance. Social dynamics are a basis of work performance which affect the overall efficiency of individual and which also affect the productivity of industry. So it results in the fourth study, that is a bank wiring observation room. This observation or this experiment were conducted to obtain information about social group within the company. For that experiment, 14 male operators were observed and interviewed in a separate room. There were 9 wiremen, 3 soldermen and 2 inspectors. An observer was stationed in the room to note formal organization of supervisors and employee, informal grouping of men, means interpersonal relationships at workplace, or interrelationship of these two types of organization. Interviewer who was not in the room was to gain insight into workers' attitude, thoughts and feeling. It was found that in this experiment, even though they were paid on daily output basis, they did not raise the output. Individual production remained fairly constant over a period of time. They adjusted the reports and record about the output and working time. After studying and analyzing, it was concluded that they form a highly organized social structure with definite pattern of communication, differentiation and recognized leaders. These groups have a set of norms and the whole group followed it. These codes were conflicting to what the management expected from them. Members who did not behave in accordance with the norms were brought back into line or left alone. Four main determinants of this social structures are rate busting. It means don't work too much, don't work too less, don't tell supervisor anything that would harm any members of the group, don't be obvious, that is one should behave as more of a group member socially and not as an agent of company. This applied to inspectors, group chiefs as well as workers. Reason for formation of these groups were to protect the group from inside control or outside constancy of productions. The researchers thought that the efficient worker would put pressure on the less efficient worker to complete the work. However, it was found that the group established its own standards of output and social pressure was used to achieve standards of output. There is only a limited change to work conditions, that supervision would remain the same, observer would record data only, no interaction with workers. So the result is no appreciable change in output because the efficient labor can protect the inefficient labors. The conclusion of this experiment is pre-existing performance norms, group dictated production standard, or work group protection from management changes. The conclusion of Hawthorne experiment, we can sum up the findings from all the experiment to determine overall conclusion from Hawthorne experiment. First, that is a human factor. Alton Mayo find out in his study the human factor act at workplace, and workplace is a social system. He observed that or determined that at a workplace the human relations are more effective for efficiency or productivity rather than monetary incentives. He was also found that sociological and psychological factor is also affect the output of workers. The level of motivation, like money is not the only motivating factor which is responsible for the efficiency of worker. Interpersonal relationships or social relationships is also play an important role for motivation or for motivate workers at workplace. Social values, wages, working hours, working conditions were not entities in themselves but carriers of social values. Informal organizations, workers formed social groups which had their own norms, codes. The group played an important role in determining the attitude of workers and performance of individual workers. The effect of leadership is also observed in this experiment, and Mayo found that the informal group has their own leaders and workers' behavior was a result of the norms set and enforced by the leader and group. He also found that there are so many factors which affect a worker's behavior, like inside and outside factor at workplace affected the behavior and production of workers. The way of communication, like downward communication, was necessary to inform about managerial decisions and policies to keep workers informed for proper functioning, and upward communication for necessary to transmit feelings and sentiments of workers. So the way of communication or good communication between the superiors and subordinates can improve the relations at workplace, and which helps to improve the productivity of the subordinates. The special attention and freedom to express their views to improve the performance of the workers. It helps to motivate workers. It helps to create a sense of belongingness which affect the efficiency and productivity both. When employees are treated with respect and dignity, their performance will also improve at workplace. And thus, Hawthorne experiment results in the formation of human relation schools. Now, the criticism of Hawthorne experiment, the experiments are mainly criticized on the following grounds. First is the lack validity. The experiment were conducted under controlled situation. These findings will not work in real setup of industry. The workers under observation knew about the experiment, therefore they may have improved their performance only for the experiments. More importance to human aspect. The Hawthorne experiment give too much importance to human aspect. He only consider a human aspect alone cannot improve production. Production also depends on the technology, types of material, types of method we can use for a production, etc. It is more emphasized on a group decision making. The Hawthorne experiment placed too much emphasis on group decision making in real situation. Individual decision making can not be totally neglected, especially when quick decisions are required and there is no time to consult there. Over importance to freedom of work. The Hawthorne experiment gave a lot of importance to freedom of work. It does not give importance to the constructive role of the supervisor. It is also methodology used at Hawthorne is clinical insights rather than scientific evidence, validity of which is questionable. In this experiment, the employee was the head. In this experiment, we considered that happiness of employees were directly proportional to the productivity, but it was proved later that there is no direct relationship between them. The theory is believed to lack unified approach of organizational theory that is not satisfactory. It is critically believed that the vast difference between the bank wiring observation room and a relay assembly test room results was caused by the fact that one group was male and other is a female. Evidence from other sources proved this. It is believed that the actual work was ignored by the human relationalists and they were completely people-centric. In this approach, they not considered to be a universal, as practically there are many environmental and work conditions at workplace which has not been considered, and that thus it could not be applied to all type of organization. That's why the Hawthorne experiment is also criticized. So thank you.